This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm your host, Ahval editor David Lepeska, and with me today is Guillaume Perrier, longtime Turkey correspondent for leading French newspaper Le Monde. Hello, Guillaume, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We are speaking on Tuesday, August 25th, as German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas visits both Athens and Ankara in an effort to diffuse rising Turkey-Greece tensions, which are largely due to disputes over maritime claims in the eastern Mediterranean, particularly around the islands of Crete and Cyprus, near which Turkey has sent several drilling ships in the past year, to the dismay of Greece and the Republic of Cyprus, as well as the European Union. France has been playing a significant role in all this, particularly since a maritime incident in June when a French frigate tried to inspect a cargo ship as part of its NATO mission to enforce an arms embargo on Libya. Paris says the French ship was harassed by 3 Turkish Navy vessels escorting the cargo ship and was even targeted by one of the Turkish ships. Turkey denies this and says the cargo ship was delivering humanitarian aid. Either way, France pulled out of that NATO mission and joined a European Union mission to enforce the embargo. A French foreign ministry official put it well when he said last month, "What do you do when you have a NATO surveillance mission and one of those in the alliance, in the NATO alliance, is the one doing the trafficking?" He was, of course, referring to Turkey, which is a NATO member, but increasingly seen as problematic of late due to its military intervention in Libya, its Eastern Mediterranean aggressions, as I mentioned, and its purchase of Russian-made S-400 missile defenses. Guillaume, if you would please expand on the French view of all this. Why has France been increasingly supportive of the Greek position, and why have Turkey's policies in the Eastern Mediterranean been particularly upsetting to the French government, to President Emmanuel Macron?
It's true that it has not always been like that. If you remember, for example, 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, President Erdogan was much more isolated at that time. He was persona non grata in Washington, in Berlin, and Emmanuel Macron was the one who broke the isolation of Recep Tayyip Erdogan at that time. He was the Turkish president was invited in Paris for a state visit, and
in 2018, right?
Sorry?
In 2018, yes.
Yes, 2018, in January 2018, exactly. And at that time, Emmanuel Macron thought that he would be able to open a dialogue with Erdogan, as he did with Vladimir Putin before that. So his idea was that he would be the one in Europe talking to the autocrats, basically. And that was his way of opening new diplomatic channels to some countries. But then, as you mentioned, a series of tensions happened between France and Turkey, particularly because of the situation in Libya. You mentioned to the incident with the frigates. That was already tensed between Turkey and France when that happened. But for sure, this incident marked opened a new period, a new time between both countries. We know that France and Turkey have opposite interests in Libya, of course. French government supported Haftar since he tried to retake Tripoli, so that was the main reason. But it's not the only reason. To be honest, we often consider rightfully that Erdogan has domestic reasons for expanding his power in the Mediterranean. We should also have in mind that it's the same reason why Emmanuel Macron started to oppose Erdogan. We have to think that the presidential elections will happen in 2 years in France. So starting from now, we start to enter a kind of campaign period when Macron obviously has to look for votes on the right side of the political hemisphere. So he has to take votes from the rightist parties, and he has, of course, to limit the influence of far-right party headed by Marine Le Pen. So this means he has to show is strongly opposed to Turkey's rule, and especially in the Mediterranean, but also inside France and on the domestic scene. There is also a number of reasons why Erdogan creates trouble in the French politics. Now we can go back to January. So much before the incident happened in the Mediterranean, Emmanuel Macron did a speech about French separatism. He used that word to target Turkish political activities inside French politics. And in a way, he did that speech in Mulhouse, near the German border. Mulhouse is very important, one of the most important places for the Turkish community in France, and mostly pro-AKP voters. So he deliberately targeted Turkish interests and tensions created by Turkish groups to please, in a way, the rightist voters, or let's say secularists in France. So Turkey is a useful tool also for French politics. That's a point. But the other point is that Emmanuel Macron also tries to be the head of European Union, and there is a difference of approach. If you compare to Germany, of course, it's quite obvious these days. As you mentioned, Germany tries to solve the Turkey-Greece problem by
right. Germany is trying to mediate both in between Turkey and Greece, and in Libya.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And France tries to take another way to solve the problem, and they took side with Greece, Cyprus, and tried to be the voice of those countries in Europe.
Well, that's interesting. You say that much like Erdogan, Macron, even though neither of them is facing an election either anytime soon, both of them are playing to their nationalist voters in their own countries. 2 weeks ago, Macron announced that France would increase its military presence in the Eastern Mediterranean as a way to support Greece in its stand against Turkey. And last week, France dispatched 2 warships and 2 fighter jets to the region. I wonder what you thought of that, what French citizens think of their country's deepening involvement in a dispute that is 1,000 miles away, and it seems largely unrelated to French domestic concerns.
Honestly, French people are not very much interested in this Mediterranean battles. I mean, the agenda is much more domestic at the moment, with the coronavirus and unemployment problems, economy. So it's not on top of the agenda for most of the people, of course. But as I said, Turkey is more and more perceived also as as a possible troublemaker inside French politics. So this is something that French people realized recently. It's not new, of course. AKP activities outside of the country are well known, but this appeared more clearly, especially in the last local elections that happened in June and September, and local candidates from pro-Erdogan party appeared, and this is a much more discussed topic than before, for sure. And yes, Erdogan is understood now as a potential threat against Europe, but we wouldn't say that's something new, honestly.
Right, you mentioned the focus on domestic issues. Before we get to Libya and issues related to that, I wanted to say last month the French Senate published a 240-page report that highlighted the Muslim Brotherhood as the top Islamist enemy within France. And the report said that Turkey, along with Qatar, is the main backer of the Muslim Brotherhood in France. I wonder how that was received, how that report was received in France, and how people in France now view Turkey following this report.
I haven't read much about this report and comments that could have been published since, but yeah, again, it's not something new. I mean, we know that AKP supporters, AKP organizations in France are connected to Muslim Brotherhood. We know that there are activities that are really close to AKP organization. We know that they support organizations like COGEP in Strasbourg, which is very active. We know, I mean, it's not something new. Again, there are links between Turkey and, let's say, the militants against Islamophobia in France. There are such initiatives, but yeah, it appears more on the international sphere that Turkey and Qatar, of course, are supporting Libyan government or Islamist groups here and there. And on the other side, we have to say that France is more and more aligned on its traditional allies in the Middle East, starting with the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and that makes sense. So we obviously have two sides on that question.
Turning to Libya, where France has long had a significant presence, French oil giant Total first started working in Libya in the 1950s. And then, of course, in 2011, amid the Arab Spring uprisings, France led the NATO campaign to oust Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, then basically watched as the country fell into chaos. One could say that France is more responsible than any other outside actor for the trouble in Libya today. And maybe that's why one of Macron's first high-profile diplomatic initiatives after taking office in 2017 was to invite Khalifa Haftar and Government of National Accord, or GNA leader Sarraj, to a chateau outside Paris to try to negotiate a power-sharing deal. Those talks failed, obviously, and France went on to back Haftar in his fight against the GNA, which is supported by Turkey. But I wonder if you think the French, and maybe Macron in particular, feels some responsibility in terms of, quote, fixing Libya, or at least pushing it towards stability.
No, I don't think so. Responsibility from the French state, definitely. As you said, they share the responsibility for what happened in 2011, and they played the major role. But it was Sarkozy who was president at that time. Hollande, of course, didn't change much the policy towards Libya, but No, I wouldn't say Macron shares responsibility for what has been decided in 2011. The people at the head of the state changed. It's not the same logic, but
But
there
the
is.
French government does. Sorry.
Yeah, the French government. I'm talking about that. It's not trying to solve the problems that France created in 2011. I don't think so. But there is, of course, an involvement from Total, as you mentioned, also in the Cyprus gas area. But it doesn't, for me, I mean, I don't have the answer because it doesn't explain all of the strategy, the French strategy. I think Italy has also a lot of interest in terms of involvement of oil companies, Eni in Libya
Yes.
and Cyprus as well. But their approach to the Libyan problem is much more different. And Italy also has a big share of responsibility because it's the former colonial power. So I'm not sure that explains the French strategy. Honestly, I think it's more related to the alliances with with countries in the Middle East, Emirates, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. Those
Well, actually,
countries.
let me just that's a good lead into my next question, if you'll allow me. So, yeah, Turkey. Just to give some background to the listeners, Turkey, as I said, supports the GNA, which is partially Islamist and has been linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. The French position, many say, is tied into its fight against terrorism, and as you mentioned, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi, Egyptian fight against the Turkey-Qatar alliance and their support for Islamists, particularly the Muslim Brotherhood. The UAE has been a strong supporter of Haftar in his fight against the GNA, which has seen a considerable boost in support from Turkey this year after the two signed their maritime borders deal in late 2019. So yes, Turkey and France are on opposing sides in Libya, in addition to the high seas tensions. One analyst I've spoken to, Alexander Clarkson of King's College London, likes to say that Paris has been happy to hand over its North Africa policy to the United Arab Emirates, particularly its Libya policy. I wonder if you agree with that. Is it true that France has essentially ceded its Libya policy to the UAE and to this alliance you mentioned? If so, why? And has this been a smart move?
I think it's true because France is on many fronts also, and the most important conflict it has to face now is in Sahel, more in Niger and Burkina Faso. It is much more sensitive for French army and French strategy. So I think yes, it's true that. French government aligned with the EAU for its Libya policy, and most of the Mediterranean positions it takes now. So, but we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say it's like this or like that because we see that the French diplomacy is looking for a solution, is looking for an exit. Macron invited Sarraj to Paris, and the invitation was apparently accepted yesterday or this morning. So things can change. We saw that Russia was supportive of Haftar at the beginning, and then tried to find more middle way. So I would not be surprised if France tries to find a solution in between and to reconcile a little bit more with Turkey.
About Macron and Erdogan, they have a rather complex relationship. You mentioned in 2018 the state visit to Paris. Macron also went to Istanbul to visit Erdogan.
Yes.
And they've met a number of times since, at least once or twice in 2019. But when they are apart, they tend to throw insults at each other. And particularly lately, in an interview published last week, Macron said Erdogan's expansionist policy is incompatible with European interests, potentially suggesting at least an end to EU accession negotiations, if not an ouster from NATO. This came right after Erdogan said that Macron's visit to Lebanon following the Beirut blast was colonial and all about making a spectacle. How do you see the relationship between these two?
It's, I mean, it's not something new from Erdogan to have such a relationship with foreign countries and to share insults like that. Remember in 2017 when he was shouting Nazis at the face of German or Dutch governments. It's been much worse, in fact, between Turkey and other countries, even with France in the past. Relations have been always a bit shaky, starting from the Armenian genocide issue to Kurdish issue. I mean, it's always been like that. So I'm not very. I wouldn't take conclusions because of that, because it can turn the other way in a few weeks. I mean, it's there are tensions, of course, at the moment, but it's not so meaningful in my opinion. It was better in the past. It will probably be better in the past because both countries need each other, and it's a
You
way.
mean better in the future? Sorry.
Yes. I mean, it's useful for both Erdogan and Macron to have such a rival at the moment, for domestic reasons mainly, and for reaffirming diplomatic strategy. For both of them, it's very useful. So I don't want to draw any radical conclusion out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's useful for both of them because there are these historical echoes as well. France's colonial footprint in North Africa goes back 2 centuries. In the early 19th century, an argument between Hussein Dey, the ruler of the Ottoman territory of Algiers, and the French consul there escalated into a naval blockade, following which France invaded and seized Algiers in 1830. French forces went on to battle Ottoman forces for many years and later took Tunisia from the Ottoman Empire as well. Today, Erdogan often invokes great Ottoman and Seljuk Turk victories of the past. Just today, actually, he tweeted out a very nationalist video of a almost millennium-old military victory. Macron, similarly, seems like a throwback to an era when France had much greater power and influence, a sort of de Gaulle-like statesman. Is that kind of part of their approach to each other and this situation in the Eastern Mediterranean?
It's not so visible for the French part, I would say. I would not draw such a parallel because, yes.
It's not like in Turkey. Sorry.
Yes, it's like they see it in Turkey. Of course, France is a former colonial power, but the biggest difference is that it's more and more discussed. I mean, this past is open, not very openly, but is more and more openly discussed in France and criticized and questioned. I would love to see that in Turkey, honestly. But I wouldn't say that Macron is playing that game to refer to a glorious past. He criticized the colonization. He even talked about crime against humanity, and that drew a severe reaction from the rightist parties. So he's not nostalgic from the past, but of course is the product of the French politics and French culture, which is still very much influenced by the monarchy and the idea that the powerful president is a small king. So yes, this is part of the French political culture, but I would not go to so far to say that there is a nostalgia from the past and colonial times. I mean, this is obviously arguments that are probably useful for Erdogan for his own voters, but it doesn't make sense for French politics.
You mentioned the Armenian genocide, which is a key issue between these two countries. Earlier today, you shared on Twitter a story from a French news outlet, I believe, about how Armenians in France are being persecuted by ultra-nationalist Turks. I don't have a subscription to that news outlet, so I was unable to read the piece. I wonder if you might talk a bit about that. This issue has also been a source of tension between Erdogan and Macron.
It's a very important story. I mean, it's a small story, but very meaningful. There is a French Turkish militant, very close from MHP, the ultra-nationalist.
Grey Wolves.
Yes, he's a grey wolf, and the guy's name is Ahmed Chetin, and he appears on the social media like a gang leader who pretends to raise an army in France, a Turkish army, of course, with weapons and big guys, with mustache. Pretending to show Armenians how Turks are strong and they don't accept the Armenian rule and blah blah. This kind of speech that we hear often in Turkey, in ultra-nationalist among militants, but this is more and more popular among the French-Turkish community, which is about 500,000 people, mostly pro-AKP supporters, and especially in the eastern side of France, near the German border, in Lyon also, you have a very important Turkish community, and MHP, Grey Wolves are very popular among them. So there is.
And this has been increasing in recent weeks, in recent months?
Yes, and this guy we're talking about, Ahmed Chetin, was a candidate for a small pro-AKP party in France in local elections. He was a candidate years ago. He was supported by the Turkish community, and now he organized last week or 2 weeks ago a demonstration against Armenians in a small city near Lyon, and he said that if Turkish state gives him 2,000 euro, he can go and shoot anyone who is against Turkey. That's what he said in his message. So this created a big reaction from Armenians, of course. And there is the guy was arrested, and he will be in front of a court in the coming weeks.
Are they also attacking Kurdish people online, or is it mainly Armenians?
Yes, a lot. Armenians, Kurds, and Turkish Democrats, anyone who is against them, of course, yes.
But you're saying, so this momentum online on social media has been increasing in the past year, and now kind of French news outlets are starting to notice it and report on it.
It increased not since the past year, but since a couple of years. It was not so visible, but now, of course, there is much more reaction because of the tense situation between France and Turkey. But honestly, it was already visible since 3-4 years, I'd say.
Okay. Last question for you, and a personal one, if I might. I've always really loved your Twitter handle, Au fil du Bosphore, along the Bosporus, particularly since 2016, when I was barred from entering Turkey, from seeing Istanbul and the Bosporus. You've been out of Turkey now for several years, I think, yet you still use that same Twitter handle, and your Twitter bio still says you're inside Erdogan's head. I wonder, why is that? Do you still feel Istanbul is home in some way? Do you miss Turkey?
Yes, a lot, of course. I lived there 10 years, from 2004 to 2014, 15. I came back to France at that time, but I traveled there until recently. So I'm not completely out of Turkey. I can travel there still, and Of course I miss it. I mean, anyone who lived once in Istanbul always miss this city. I guess it's the same for you. But I'm still working mostly on Turkish affairs and of course also on other issues. But it remains my main topic and my main field of investigation.
Okay, so it's still your main topic of reporting. I see. And you still go to Turkey? Have you been this year recently?
I've been last time for the elections in Istanbul in June last year.
Okay, so not since then. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you planning to go back, or is there a reason you haven't gone back since then?
Sorry?
I mean, it's been almost a year and a half. Is there a reason you haven't been since then, or just hasn't been an event?
Yes, with the corona since March, I've been nowhere since 6 months. So yes, I hope to go there.
Like most of us. Okay, Guillaume Perrier, French newspaper Le Monde. Thank you so much for your time and insights. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.